and will be available afterwards. And then just briefly, tonight's session is sponsored by Cornwall College. So I just want to say a huge thank you to Cornwall College who are paying for the Zoom fees for running this tonight, which means that every penny that you've put towards joining this evening is going towards Colleen's elected charity. And I'll let her tell you a bit more about that later on. But that's it from me. Thanks very much. I'll hand you over to Norma.
Hi, good evening, everybody, and good to see you all here again tonight. We had a course last night, so we see people regularly these days on webinars and courses. So I'm really excited to bring Colleen into this webinar tonight. She's an amazing swimmer, and I would need to take a deep breath to list all her achievements. But for those of you who don't know her, Colleen is a regional development manager for the Highlands and Islands and Moray with Scottish Swimming. And she's been doing that for a number of years, and recently she was awarded an MBE for all her work in her job. But not only that, it's her adventurous nature with swimming. And tonight she's going to tell you all about that this evening. But just to give you a wee bit of an introduction to what she's done, from my own memory, I remember that Colleen has done the Pentland Firth, which for some of you who don't know, I think it's known as Hell's Mouth. So that is quite a phenomenal swim to achieve because it's where the North Sea and the Atlantic meet. She's also done the Catalina Channel. Wait till I get my breath for this one. Catalina Channel, the English Channel, the North Channel, the North Minch. She's done Loch Tay, Loch Ness. She's done an Ice Mile and two-way Windermere, and I've probably missed out a few there. So I am going to pass you over to Colleen, and we're going to find out a wee bit more about why she is such an adventurous swimmer and where it's all come from. Hi, Colleen. You're still on mute, I think. Hiya.
Hi, Norma. Thank you for having me, and thank you for that introduction. Yeah, I have done quite a lot. I started open water swimming journey when I was 7 years old. A charity swim in Dundee from the railway bridge to the road bridge where you swim down with the tide. My sister was doing it with her friends, and I kind of talked my parents into letting me swim it. I did most of it on my dad's back, but that was kind of the start of my journey into open water. From there, I did some competitions from the Scottish Championships through. At the age of 14, my sister was swimming the Channel, who's 4 years older than I am. And we went to Ireland, and there was a spare kayak at a 17K swim. And the organisers basically said, you can swim to halfway if you want. That's not a problem. And I was like, oh, right, okay, I could do that. And they said, the first thing you'll see is a building that's halfway, but I only breathe to one side. So when I saw the building, I got excited because I thought it was time to get out. Only be told I was 2 miles from the end and just to keep swimming. So that was really my first big swim. And then it's kind of just growing from there, and new challenges starting, and then you build on that and then build on that, and it just keeps on kind of going. So over the years, yeah, I have done lots of challenges, and we're always trying to think of the next thing to do. But yeah.
And so you made a career out of swimming as well. Obviously, it's not just, a sideline.
Yeah, I did coaching science at uni, specialising in swimming. Came home, couldn't get jobs, so went back into swimming teaching and lifeguarding. Ended up being a pool manager before now working with Scottish Swimming, helping support the swimming clubs and support the development of open water swimming as well.
So I don't know how you fit it all in. When you list all these things, I don't know how you fit the training in, especially marathon swimming. So tell us a wee bit about the training, sort of when you started, even how difficult did you find the training, or how did you get into cold water? Or
I think I'm really bad at training, if I'm honest. It's probably the thing I like the least. My younger days, I trained in the pool and played water polo, and it was probably easier. But then coming into the summer season, into the open water season, I had my mum and dad as my crew, who still are, and Ian Reid, who was a local swimmer, who was somebody that I really looked up to because he was the first channel swimmer I'd ever met, and would sit down with Ian at about April time, and start working out with swims for the summer. So when I was 18, I wanted to swim the North Channel, and everybody was like, no, like, you're not ready for it. But my parents supported me to do it. So Ian said that I needed to learn to suffer because I always just come out smiling, and I'd never really learned how to suffer. So yeah, we did Loch Earn but I didn't actually finish it in early May with the snow on the hills, and it was absolutely freezing, just so that I could learn to toughen up a little bit. But then we had gradually built my swims in, so that I had a 15-mile swim probably 4 or 5 weeks before the channels attempt. So I think from a young age, we set our season out so that I would gradually build up to bigger swims and then have your big one a few weeks after. More recently, I probably don't swim as much because of work, so I just fit swims in where I can. At weekends, I could be seen in the loch doing 6 hours in a 20-minute loop because that's what's needed. It's choppy, we can't get a boat out, or I can't get somebody to sport me, so I'll just do a 20-minute loop for 8 hours if that's what I need to do to get a big swim in. So I think somebody asked one of the questions beforehand, how do you fit in if you've only got hour slots?
Yeah.
And sometimes I do like 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, or you could do an hour in the pool and then an hour in the lake if that's where you're kind of stuck with, but then at least you're getting 2 hours in within the day. So I think it is sometimes being imaginative on how you fit your training in.
Yeah, and do you see if you split it like that, if you do 2 hours in the morning, and I mean, that's the way swimmers, competitive swimmers used to do it in a pool, but when you've got cold water and you're in a lake or sea or whatever, do you have a problem with recovery on training days at all if you've got to go to work or?
No, it is just about warming up and getting to know yourself. So sometimes I go in and I know some people are on tonight that I swim with, and I'll get out after 2 minutes and just like, nah, had enough. Or I turn up and talk myself out of it. And I'm like, it's not a good day, I'm not going in. But generally it is, I've done a Zoom meeting from the side of the loch because I've gone a longer swim than I'm meant to and have a work meeting. So I did it from the car. But you kind of make it work. And again, with the conditions, you kind of just have to fit in what you can do, but also make sure you're building it up and listening to your body. So if you are having a cold day, it's time to get out. But it's also quite good, especially if you're training for relay swims, going back in when you're still not fully warmed, because you do learn to suffer a little bit and you do learn how it is when a swim gets tough. That's just how it's been in training, and it's okay to be like that. So it is sometimes good having that balance as well.
Yeah, so have you been managing to get much training in during lockdown at all? Have you are you close to anywhere with water that you can keep your acclimatization up?
So I've been really, really lucky. When we first lockdown, obviously we weren't able to swim to start with. When we started to be able to but couldn't travel, I found a nice little spot in the river, which was about a 3K walk from the house. You could swim and just not move against the current. There's a couple of spots. So I was lucky that way. Since we've been able to travel more, Loch Tay is 15 minutes from the house. It's 5 miles from the house. So I've been in the loch most days. The weather's not great, we don't go out. So normally in the winter, I'd only swim outside maybe once or twice a week, whereas I'm probably averaging 5 or 6 days a week just now, all 10 to 20-minute swims because of the water temperature. But because I'm working from home, I've actually got more time to get out in the water, which has been great.
Yeah, so it's just a few minutes away, really, you know,
Yeah.
which is fantastic. So if you were, say you had a big challenge coming up, you know, sort of June, July time, do you set a 3-month training plan? I know you said you weren't that good at training, but would you would you recommend, is there anything you would recommend a time frame for a big swim, like 10K is big for a lot of us, so even for a 10K swim, would you recommend a starting point and a training duration?
I think probably 3 to 4 weeks before your 10K, I would want to get in probably 6 to 8K, so that you're getting a decent long swim in, because that last 2K, that's the easy bit because the hard work's done. But then at least you know how to get past that halfway point, and you know in your head going in, it's not too bad. I look at a swim, but I'm probably a bit twisted in the head, as you'll probably find out as tonight goes on. But I kind of swim to halfway, and like when I swam the Minch, Brian, who's paddling with me, said, "That's you at halfway," and I was like, "Oh yes, we've reached the top of the mountain." And he just kind of looked at me, and I'm like, well, halfway is the top of the mountain, is downhill all the way to the end, so it's all good. But that's kind of how my head works. So I think for 10K, I would work back sort of that 3-4 weeks before the actual swim. And if you could get a longer swim in that weekend and then just keep that fitness up till your 10K, that's probably the way I would work it. So building up to that 6 or 7K and then just maintaining it until your bigger swim.
And the reason I was asking that was a question that came in from somebody about a 10K, because some people are obviously they're doing it in stages. We'll do a 5K, we'll do a 10K, and then they'll potentially go up. Now, one question that's come in just as you were talking was, why do you breathe just on the one side?
I'm laughing because some of the people on know me too well. I can only breathe to one side. So the coach head in me was like bilateral. If I coach people, I might breathe to both sides. It balances your stroke. However, I can literally only breathe to one side. Also, I've had my shoulder reconstructed, and since then, it's been even harder to breathe to that side. So it does. Two sides do. Coaching me will say two sides balances your stroke out. Also, if you're on big swims or channel swims and things, and you're following a boat, then depending on the way the boat's set up, it's easier if you sit at one side of the boat rather than the other, especially if it's getting dark, or to shelter you from the wind. Whereas if you're like me and only breathe one side, then you can't get shelter from the wind some of the times, and sometimes it's harder for the boat pilots because we're at their blind side, or we have to sit at their blind side. So I think, again, breathing to one side is probably a habit from when I was younger, because the sport was very different then. So we used to all have a boat rather than swimming around marker buoys or swimming in mass. Everybody would have their own boat beside them. So we would breathe to the one side to see our boat. I can't swim straight. Like, it's hilarious, my trackers when I'm training, because it's a zigzag line. So I'm used to a boat being in the side. So that's why I always breathe to the one side.
So they better know where they're going then, the boat.
That's their job. That's not my job. My job is just to swim and follow them.
And that's an important point. We'll come to that maybe later on as we talk about the actual swims, during them. Another question that's come in about training and is in terms of cold physical training, can you give some tips on how you explore your limit? How did you get to know your limits, basically?
I don't think I do know my limits, if I'm honest. At training, I will get cold. I normally get out before I get too cold, especially if I'm being bad and out on my own. If I'm out on my own, I swim in a shallow bit, which I know is not the safest, but it's hard to get somebody to come out for 5-6 hours with you. So if I do have to do it, then I do. But it is building it up. Again, I think I've been really fortunate because Dad and Ian Reid's been on my boat since I was young. So they kind of know when I'm getting cold. So I think for those that are maybe looking at bigger swims that have boat crews with them, is making sure that the people that are on it know you better than you know you, because you can get really cold and talk yourself out of things. Whereas if you entrust them, then they can see if you're making sense. If your stroke rate's starting to slow down, so there's lots of different signs that you are starting to slow down and start getting cold. So your lips going blue. Like when I swam Loch Ness, I chewed all the inside of my mouth because my teeth were chattering that much towards the end. But I was still moving and still answering my boat's conversation. And I was like 200 meters from the end, and it took nearly 20 minutes because I was that cold. And I think your boat have a responsibility, but they've got a hard choice. Do they pull you after 23 miles? Or are you okay for you to stay in? And there is that thin line. But I think if you are just training, you're better to get out before you're too cold. And then if you come out and you don't really shiver, you're kind of like, I got it too soon. Next time I could do a bit more. And it is just learning. Yeah, I don't think I still know where my limits are.
Yeah, I think that's quite interesting, really, because that's a good question to ask. How do you know your limits? And it is different for everybody. I mean, like you say, you don't know your limits because you rely on other people to know your limits as well. So you've had that team around you for years, which is great. And I think that's probably quite important for anybody considering marathon swimming, that they look for a good team. Am I right?
I'd say so. My team are amazing. I don't know if I'll quickly share a slide. This is my main team. So normally I've got my mum and dad who have been all around the world with me. I've had to put up with me at all my swims. And Ian Reid's on the other picture. And I think for me, I wouldn't have been able to do what I do without these guys. And they sort my feed. Well, I sort my feeds out, but then they give me my feeds. They change the times of my feeds. They tell me to speed up. They tell me to slow down. And I think I am quite unique because my team is so close to me and know me so well. and not everybody's so fortunate. But then I've been fortunate at other places. So this picture on the left is at Scar in America, which is 4 lakes in 4 days, which is an amazing event. It's one of my favorite swims. And the person in the kayak next to me is Blake, who's now a really good friend, who volunteered his time to come and kayak for me because he wants to go and swim it. So I met Blake the night before the competition started, and I just had to give Blake the trust and go, here's all my stuff. This is what I need you to do. This is where I want you to sit, because again, if you're not used to swimming by kayak in a boat, where you breathe, a lot of people think the boat should sit in front of you, but it should really sit to the side or behind, so that when you breathe, you can see the whole boat. That way you can know what direction you're swimming in by following the boat. And on the right-hand side, Brian, who paddled the Minch with me. So I've been really lucky because I've got my experienced crew. But again, sometimes I don't have them. I've got a kayak, and you just have to, as a swimmer, give up that trust to them and just trust that they'll do their job, and your job is to swim.
Yeah, you've probably not got the choice really, because you're in there, you've got a task at hand, you know, and and so the kayaker, it must be a long journey for them though. I mean, I've done just very short swims compared to you, Colleen, but I've had that sort of trust in the kayaker, and you want to keep looking at them, and you need to know they're there because you've got something else to do yourself. So it really is a team effort, and if they go a wee bit far away from you, I remember this myself, you do start to feel, you know, when I started anyway, it was a little bit, I wasn't used to deep water, and but yeah, it's very psychological. So from that point, tell us about your mindset. There's lots of questions coming in about how do you do it? What do you think about? You know, do you have a pre-swim mindset before you start?
I think it's changed over the years. I get laughed at from the group I swim at because my brain is twisted. So if we swim in the shallows and there's reeds, everybody else is freaked out and goes to the deep. Whereas I swim over the top of them thinking, what could be under there? What could come and grab me? How exciting is this? And everybody's just like, you're twisted and wrong. But in the past, I have been scared. And I think you've got to accept where you're swimming. Like, we're swimming in the sea, we're swimming in. So I was scared. The North Channel went wrong the first time I tried it. And after that, I was scared of jellyfish for a lot of years. And I think I did a swim in Ireland where I decided to just swim into a jellyfish because I think the fear of being stung was worse than the sting itself. And it sounds a bit twisted, but once I did that, actually, I was okay. And now I've kind of got the mindset for creatures, because I know there was a few questions about how do you get over your fear. For me, we're in their house, we're in their garden, we're like in their place. So we need to respect them and understand they're there, and there's nothing that we can do about it. So it is about just letting it go and actually looking at things and being excited about what's actually around us. And sometimes as swimmers, we get to see amazing things when we're swimming. And instead of, I know so many swimmers swim with their eyes closed, not to see it. And to me, you're missing half of the excitement, because like, what is underneath you? But for the hard swims, I normally just kind of switch off. There's two, for some of the big swims, I don't always publicize that I'm doing it. I don't always do it for charity because I don't deal with pressure. So people saying, knowing that I'm doing something, or people saying, oh, you've done that before, so you'll be fine on this swim. I can't really deal with it. So my best way is just to shut everything out. So at the start, the Minch swim, we were 2 hours on the boat to get to the start. And I just put my headphones on, curled in a ball, and fell asleep on the boat, and got up 10 minutes before we started to swim. And that's kind of, yeah, everybody else was wondering about it and stuff, whereas I just curled in a ball and fell asleep with my earphones in. And I think I just need to take that time out, calm down. Then Dad helps me. If it's on a boat, Dad will then help me put my grease and everything else on. If we're on shore, Mum does it. But then Dad is probably better because I normally snip at him and I'm not in the best mood because I just need to switch off. Yeah. But then once you jump in the water, you're in the water. Like the Minch, I jumped in and all you could see was jellyfish. It was 9 degrees, which I didn't realize it was going to be as cold. So the first thing I did when I jumped in was like, what have I got myself into? And then I had to get to swim to the start, and swimming to the start, it was almost like, this is going to be a hard day in the office. Yeah. Tough luck, you've signed up to this. Just get your head cleared, and actually your job in hand is to get to the other side. It's going to be hard, it's going to be cold, but tough luck, it's your own fault. And then during the swim, yeah, getting to that halfway point and then it's downhill. But when things get hard, it's swimming feed to feed, or I know we'll probably speak about nutrition later, but every third feed of mine, I have jelly babies. So that's probably 2.25 hours. So I swim to my jelly babies. So one swim is to your jelly babies. The next swim is to the next set of jelly babies. And it's almost like running, you could do it from points, whereas swimming you can't, or you can do it from feed to feed. And the other thing with mindset is never look up and never look behind you. So on the Minch swim, hopefully I've got the picture on the slideshow. At the end, this lighthouse, I know it's not the best picture, but the end of that swim, the lighthouse was 1.5 miles from the finish, from where we were. And I was stuck there for 5 hours in the tide swimming, but I was blissfully unaware. But could you imagine if you saw that for 5.5 hours and you weren't getting closer? It messes with your head. So I've learned over the years never to look up, never to look behind me, always just look to the side of my boat, and then you have no clue where you are. But it means that if things go wrong, you're unaware and it doesn't play in your head.
Yeah, that's a good tip, actually. Never look up. And you definitely sound like you're determined, because jumping in at 9-degree water and thinking this is a lot colder than I thought, some of us would be going, oh, I don't know if I'm up for this, or you know, they'd instantly let those doubts get in. But you've obviously got that mindset fixed. Would you say it's more, is it the challenge you're after? Is it the end result you're after? Crossing something for the first time, is that what's driving you?
It's a hard one to say, and I think with the mindset again is, I should have actually said at the end, like when the going gets tough, you just think, when I swam Catalina, my kayaker, I was struggling with my shoulder, said, how far do I have to go? How long? And he's just like, you'll get there when you get there. And I'm like, what kind of answer is that? How far have I got to go? And he's like, you'll get there when you get there, but the only way you're going to get there is one arm at a time. And I remember swimming off in a bad temper because I'm like, what kind of answer? But since then, that's how I look at a swim, because you do reel the finish in with each arm pull. And I think as you go in, yeah, that swim, you did think, what am I doing here? But actually, that's my job for the day. My job is to get to the end. And for as far as first swims go, there's something exciting about it, especially when you first look at it and people go, that's impossible. Nobody can swim that. You're not going to manage to do that. Or people look at me and go, she doesn't look like much of a swimmer. She'll never manage that. It's almost giving people 2 fingers to say, haha, I've done it. And that's maybe a bit childish, but I think I've always been like that. So I'm a bit of a red rag to bull type person. Say you can't do it, and then I will do everything I can to make sure I do it. And there's something exciting about the organising, and then the swim itself. It is hard going. Straight after, you're just totally wrecked. And then the next day or two, when it starts to sink in, that's when you could probably get the most pleasure out of it. But for me, I think it's something about pushing the boundaries and actually what is possible rather than what's not possible.
Yeah. And so this is a very, I want to know what's on your mind, but other people have asked. So from, as you say, one arm pull to the next, what sort of thoughts are going through your head on a long swim like that? Anything?
It's a really hard thing. I've got the memory and the attention span of a goldfish. So if on land and water, I have no attention, and the guys I swim with will know that I'm like this, and I'm just away with the fairies and most of the best of times. But I think when you're swimming, you can normally switch off. I just find my little bubble, or I just find my happiest place, and you can kind of just switch off. So like training, there's nothing better than having a day or even an early morning swim where you didn't get a good night's sleep because work is just bouncing in your head. You can't switch off. And as soon as I go into that dark, cold water, my mind just goes blank. And I think for me, that's my place where my mind stops. And that's my just calm and relaxed place. And I think on big swims, trying to get to that calm place doesn't always work. Sometimes works for a couple of hours and it comes back. And I remember like the North Channel, I got We Will Rock You stuck in my head. I don't even know why that song would get stuck in my head. And it was like 2 hours and only one bit of it. My stroke rate was going with the chain, and I was just, I was raging. And the more I tried to forget it, I couldn't. And then I looked up, and my dad, Ian Reid, and Tom, who was my observer, was sitting leaning against over the edge of the boat. And my granddad used to sing a song, 3 Cars Sat Upon a Wa. And that kind of that changed the song completely in my head. I try not get songs in my head because it's just bad news. And I think it is just thinking of a happy place and just relaxing. The Minch was very different because there was so many jellyfish. So for most of the swim, or for the first half, although most of them were moon jellies, it was almost dodging. So you're constantly looking, paying attention so that you could dodge onto your side, do single arm, because we knew it was going to be a long day. So the plan was to try and get stung as least as possible for as long as possible. Eventually by halfway switched off and kind of got stung after that. But sometimes there are things you need to pay attention to. Also, there's the boat, so you do need to pay attention to your boat. But I think you just have to find your happy place.
Yeah. And see, what do you put on your body to protect you, even just from obviously the sun, the jellyfish? Is there anything that you swear by?
No, I think I get really bad. I rip the skin off my neck all the time. So I generally use called channel grease, which is a mix of lanolin and Vaseline mixed together. It's normally 75-80% lanolin, the rest Vaseline, melt it and mix it together, and it's horrible stuff, but it stays on. I've had 3rd-degree burns on my legs for not putting suntan lotion on properly, and I burn quite easily. So when I swam Scar the first year, one of the recommendations was using nappy cream with high zinc oxide in it as sunblock. So now I get covered head to toe in Sudocrem.
Okay.
Not the best to get off your clothes afterwards. So like the Minch, I was covered in white, and that was Sudocrem. Normally it's like over the top and like your face, but it's it's the sunblock, but it also is really good to stop friction burns. For the jellyfish, you do get anti-jellyfish sting cream, which I think probably helps more in your head than probably helps itself. The Minch, I put that on, and then I covered myself in Sudocrem, especially my legs, but front of my legs, because I thought, well, they're going to hit the jellyfish first. Didn't put on my forearms because I like feeling the water with my forearms, but it just helped my head probably than actually helped.
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally understand the amount of jellyfish you might come across in the Minch. We see them on the ferry, and I remember seeing them coming into Rodal Harbour, swimming there, and it was just like a pinball machine, basically. They were everywhere. Really difficult to avoid that. So, but I totally agree with you. The fear of jellyfish is sometimes worse. Obviously, there are some people out there that do get nasty reactions, but... And have you ever been seasick on any of your swims, or has there anything happened that you had to stop?
I know that question came in before. I think I've been lucky. I'm sick in my swims, but that's just tough luck, and that's part of being a marathon swimmer, is throwing up and carrying on swimming. You can time it with your stroke, so as you breathe out, you're sick, and then you can breathe back in, and it's all good. So if you get good at it, you don't break your stroke, and your boat doesn't even know you're doing it. So I am a bit gross. I think for not making swims, I've been, touch wood, really, really lucky in my career. My first swim I didn't make, I was probably 13, 14. It was a 1 mile race. Took off, forgot my inhaler, had an asthma attack. The North Channel, the first time, conditions, asthma, jellyfish, there was lots of things that didn't happen. I'm trying to think what else. Loch Earn in Ireland, my favourite swim. I had a bad shoulder for years, and it came out of joint and didn't go back in, so I didn't finish it that year. Rathlin Island in Ireland, it was a invitational swim, and that was a swim I swam into jellyfish on purpose, so I was quite happy. I didn't mind I didn't finish because I was happy with jellyfish, but I'd got washed 10 miles off the course with the tides, so the boat said you were out, and I was like, yeah, that's fine, get me out. So I've never really had a point that I've made the decision, and I think you can't think what's going to stop me. Like, if you're sick, you're sick. It's tough luck, get swimming. As long as you can still take nutrition on, as long as you keep hydrated. Some people get too sick and they can't. I get that, but sometimes swimmers almost think, well, I've been sick, I need to get out. Well, no, you need to swim through it, and it's just part of swimming. And I think, again, my crew are great. I think Jersey to France I struggled with, and I was doing big puppy eyes to my dad to try and get him to call the swim, and he's just like, I'm not calling the swim. If you really think you can't get on, touch the boat and disqualify yourself, knowing fine that I'd be like, no way am I doing that. So again, I think my mindset is I would keep on going until I can't lift my arms. And some of us are made that way, some of us aren't. And I think sometimes at training, it's easy to get out. Whereas if you tough it out during training, then you can tough it out during a swim. And again, I look at a swim as a day in the office. And sometimes you have a really bad day in the office, but it's tough luck. You need to stay until the end. And a swim's exactly the same.
Okay, so very determined by the signs of it. So talking about, well, you were talking about vomiting and seasickness and things like that, but can you talk us through your nutrition plan? And when you started marathon swimming, were you given advice, or do you take advice? How has it developed into what you take now for your swims?
I think I've not changed much. When my first long swim, because I wasn't supposed to be swimming, it was really before energy drinks really came. I drank orange juice with glucose added into it. My sister used to have like Kendal mint cake and honey sandwiches and tomato soup and things. I quite liked hot orange and hot chocolate, but now I then went into high five. I messed up my feeds and put too much powder in some bottles, not enough in others, and it made me sick, and I just can't drink it now. So I then went into PSP, which is SIS Go Energy now, and that's all I've ever drank for the last like 20 years on the swims. So I found what works for me. A lot of swimmers swear by what works for them, and I think it's about just practicing. And what I have on freshwater swims is different from saltwater swims because it tastes different with the salt. That's what works for you. And we went to Spain with a few friends. Everybody was channel swimmers that were there. But I knew with the Minch coming up, that was before, I think it was the first time I had it booked. I wanted to have backup. So the swim that I was sick because of my energy drinks, I ended up having ambrosia creamed rice. And that was the only thing that stayed down, as gross as it sounded. Everybody thought I was mad. So poor mum went to Spain, sat at a bar and was able to give us our feeds when we came in every hour. And I had Jaffa cakes, I had cream rice, I had everything you could imagine I had. And I was having feeds more often just so that I could work out what works for me. And again, if you're the person that can only swim an hour, 2 hours, because that's all you're allowed at the facility, then eat what you're going to eat before you get in the water, or 5 minutes in, stop and have a feed every 15 minutes so that you can actually see how your body reacts to it. And it's also checking, can your drinks be heated? Because I know a friend got really ill and had to get pulled from a swim because they heated their energy drink and the components of their energy drink couldn't be heated. So again, it's the hot drinks versus the cold drinks. Personally, I stick with cold drinks. So the Minch, I think till halfway I got hot chocolate. That's my treat at halfway. And then a couple of near the end, I was getting really cold, so I got a couple more hot chocolates. But apart from that, all my feeds were cold. But one thing I would say is keep it as simple as you can. So again, all my bad pictures, if I can find the right slide. So when I went to Scar, I knew my kayaker didn't really know me, and I wanted to keep my feeds as simple as possible. So this is my feed bag. It's a mesh bag that my drink bottles and all my containers fit in. Laminated card, we're running stopwatch time because I feed on the 45 minutes and always have. After 6 hours or 6:45, I go to half-hour feeds, so they're a little bit sooner. But my clear bottle is my Go Energy. The yellow bottle is my electrolyte / carb drink. So my feeds are color-coded. So that's why I say I swim to my yellow bottle and my jelly babies. So on the Minch, I had jelly babies. I think I had banana near the end and I just threw it straight back up. Brian laughed and went, I knew that was going to happen. Here's some jelly babies. But like my jelly babies are in this little plastic tub you can see on the screen, because as soon as they get wet, they go slimy. So I have tubs with just 2 or 3 in it. Okay. I also only like the yellow, the orange, and the green ones. So I'm really sad and pick out the ones I like, because there's nothing worse than swimming to a feed and it's something you don't like. And I know a lot of swimmers thought one kind of food was what you need to have to be a channel swimmer or a marathon swimmer. And they would be taking stuff to stop them throwing their feeds up. And I'm like, why would you do that? Why would you swim for like 5-6 hours and you're looking forward to your feed? It's something you don't even like. So my advice is get stuff that you like. So fresh water, I like my Jaffa cakes and my jelly babies. whereas saltwater, I much prefer my jelly babies. But again, yes, what works for you, and just trying out different methods.
So you mentioned there about, you know, obviously some people have been, where they train, they're restricted by the time slots that they have, you know, pool or lake or whatever. So just to go over that again, so you recommend them sort of testing their feeds every 15, 20 minutes, even on a 2-hour swim, just to see how their body reacts. I think that's really good advice, actually, because some of us, you know, how can we get the training in, and how do we practice what food works, you know, because it might end your training if you don't get it right. So it's quite good advice.
I would say it's better to have a bad training session and throw up in a training session than it is in a big swim. So if ideally you would want to do a long training swim and practice different feeds, but if you don't have that luxury, then yeah, feed every 20 minutes, half an hour. It's only a training swim. So actually you've got time to play with different stuff to find out what works best for you.
Yeah. Now, see, when you mentioned about the Minch towards the end there, you said there was 5 hours of you being in the same spot. Is that right? What was going through your head then? Did you have any, somebody's asked a question about hallucinating. You know, I would imagine if you come to the very end of something and you're not getting anywhere, I know you said you weren't looking up, but did you have anything going through your head then?
So I was totally, it wasn't until I watched the film back and it was on the adventure show that I actually found that out. I was totally unaware that I knew we'd been in longer than what we were hoping. Well, no, I'd said 16 to 18 hours, so I was kind of where I was. But I stopped because I was getting cold and had a chat with Ian and Dad shedding water. But that swim, yeah, you had to concentrate all the time because of the jellyfish. And it was a very different swim. I think the North Channel, when I did it at the end, it's the first time I've seen inflorescence. So when your hand pulled through the water, it glowed. And I remember a couple of strokes, I started waving my hand in front of my face thinking, wow, this is really cool. And then I realized I wasn't actually swimming because I was too enthralled by all these lights in front of me.
Wow.
So yeah, for me, I've never really got to that point. But again, I don't know if it's because of the interaction with my crew and yeah, making sure your feeds are right and everything's right. But then everybody's different. So it's working out, yeah. Like my sister used to sleep when she swam. She swims straight and suddenly go squint, and it's because she was snoozing. That we all do things differently. And I think it's getting to know your own body. And if that's the kind of swimmer you are, it's how far do you push that, or when do you have to pull that back?
Yeah, it's about building it up, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a question here about the planning. I'm just looking at the time, it's 20 to 9 just now, just to let you know. So how do you negotiate between the need to plan big swims well in advance and the impossibility of predicting the weather? So how big a window, basically, Rhiannon's asking.
How long is a piece of string? It's a really hard one. So North Channel, I had it booked, I think, not the summer before I did it. Was it summer before I did it? And got withered out. So I sat the summer just waiting on a phone call. The year I swam it, my dates were July and we swam it in September. So I'd literally given up, put all my kit away, and then got the phone call. And it is hard to keep your training. With the Minch, I was really lucky because I'd planned it 2 years before and the weather didn't hold out and we didn't get to go. I had a week's window and the weather wasn't there. The planning for the Minch, others planned it, I didn't. I had 4 weeks notice. We were supposed to swim on the Saturday. Everything was organised for the Saturday and the weather wasn't great and we went the Sunday, but we were really lucky. But most people on big swims like channel swims and stuff, you probably get a 5-day window. If it's someplace local to you, and you could get a bigger window, that's probably the best option. But then it's hard to keep your training and motivation going because you don't want to do too much in case you get that phone call the next day. So it is getting a balance, but probably if you could extend it to a 2-week window, great. But most realistically, it's normally a 5-day window.
Yeah, it's such a, you know, you don't know what's going to happen really, but I suppose your training is working towards, you've got a month or whatever in mind, and then there's this window that comes up. So in terms of your team then, so I know that your family are involved in your team. So I'm just wondering how difficult that might be for somebody who was trying to organise an adventurous swim and getting everybody together for this 5-day window. So how does that work logistically for the people in your team?
Again, I'm lucky because a lot of the swims I've done, it's been my mum and dad that have come with me. So they've taken the week off work, I've taken the week off work, and we just sit and wait, or we've had flexibility. They're both retired now, so it is slightly easier. And then, like for the North Channel, I phoned Ian Reid and said, I've got a chance to go, we need to get to Ireland tonight. And thankfully, he dropped everything and came with us, and the same with the Minch. So I think I've got 2 or 3 key crew members. In Pentland Firth, my sister stepped in and went on my boat, and my mum babysat my nephew so that she could go on my boat. So I think I've been lucky because my support crew have been families and friends.
Yeah.
If you rely on other people, it is, yeah, you just have to take your whole crew. It's sometimes easier to have self-catering so that you could eat what you want, you could sleep if you've got your swim ends up being overnight, you can sleep through the day. It's just easier, but it's building a team around that you get used to. The Minch, the guys all slept on their boats and stuff before we swam because we were there a day extra. And it is working with the team beforehand, planning who's staying where. Like mum never goes on the boat, she's land support, but she's there to coordinate and make sure everything is going right. And when things aren't, like booking accommodation or last minute and that kind of stuff, mum's always there. And for me, a swim's ended when I get the hug on shore from my mum. But it is having that support crew on land as well as on water, and just making sure there's a meeting before and after, just so that learning can happen, and then the planning for the next one.
Yeah, so just so that everybody knows, I know you've got your family, it's great. Your mum and dad have been by your side all the time, it's fantastic, and your sister. So if you wanted to have the perfect team, I'm not talking about individual people, but what types of people do you need there? Like obviously you've maybe got support on land. You've mentioned your mum as your land support. Would you have a medic? You know, what would be the ideal team for somebody if they were looking to plan an adventurous swim?
I think the person on land has to be the logistics person, the organizer, the coordinator, almost a sensible person. On the boat, it's got to be somebody that you trust. So if you're putting a team together, you pass your life over to them. Basically, your job is to put one arm in front of the other, and that's it. They do all your thinking, they do everything for you. So it's got to be somebody that you trust wholeheartedly. And if they say you're out, you're out. If they say there's nothing wrong with you, tough luck, keep swimming, that's what you do. So it has to be somebody that is going to be hard on you, but also somebody that you trust. And yeah, medic wise, it would be great. I generally don't, but I think in the world that we live in, it'd probably be a good bonus if you could get a first aider or more advanced than that, depending on the type of swim you're doing. But yeah, somebody that knows you and knows swimming so that they can coordinate with you and make sure everything is done for you. But it's quite hard. And I think I've done swims where, like Brian for the Minch, I'd never met him before, but we'd sent loads of information before, everything I wanted, where I wanted them, who was making decisions, what's happening. And I think that's the important bit, is sitting down, having the meeting beforehand. Even if you don't know your crew, this is what my expectations are of you, and this is what you should expect from me.
Yeah, so that's what you do with a team. If you've not met the skipper or whatever, you'd sit down the day before and say, this is what needs to happen. How can you make it happen? Basically.
Kind of, yeah, it is teamwork. It is complete teamwork. And it isn't like Dad annoys a lot of the boat pilots. And I know he's listening and probably laughing at me for saying that, but he asks hundreds of questions to the point it annoys people. But then he's learned so much by asking those hundreds of questions. And I think it is about not being scared to ask the why are we going this route? What's actually happening? I remember it's a swimmer's pace rather than a boat's pace, and all these kind of things, because the courses that we take as swimmers are very different than boat routes, kayaking routes, because we swim so much slower than what they can with their engines or the paddles. So again, when you're planning a big swim, it's getting the boat pilots to understand a swimmer's pace rather than what they would normally do.
Yeah, that's important. I understand. We spoke about that the other day. My husband, he's recently joined me on swims, so he's a pilot, so he now understands that it's not about the skipper's pace of the boat because you don't have an engine. That's really important. So you've got the whole team, your family, your great team, and we spoke a wee bit about medics. Have you ever had a situation where you needed a medic? So is there any issues around hypothermia with long swims or anything you can offer for advice?
I think, again, it's your crew knowing where your limits are and knowing you. So I've never had anything, touch wood. I have been lucky, apart from the shoulder, I have been quite lucky. I have been really cold, hypothermic when I've come out swims. I've got a couple in my bag. I've got my Celt bag, which is like a sleeping bag with arms and legs, that if I'm in a bad way, then I just get put in that, and my dry robe or other blankets over the top and gradually warming. And I think it's about the importance of your crew knowing how to warm a swimmer up and the recovery. And it's like simple things like your hot drink can't be actually hot because it burns the inside of you because you're that cold. So it's a lukewarm drink. Your different layers to keep you warm. For me, my asthma can play up as well. So my boat all know where my inhalers are. I always have one in my costume so that I can get it. But again, it's making sure I don't control that, they control that. And again, it's making sure your boat crew know where your limits are. And if they tell you to get out, you need to get out and respect them, because you don't really know what's happening in the water. You don't know how cold you are. So again, it's having the trust that your boat crew will get the right call. I know swimmers that's gone wrong. When I did Catalina, Stephen, who was a swimmer from Hawaii, swam at the same day as me, and he got airlifted at the end of the swim with hypothermia. I was boiled and he was hypothermic, because the sea in Hawaii is like 32 degrees and the swim was 18 degrees. So I was roasted, he was frozen. But they had to do that because he was too cold, but they weren't used to dealing with cold swimmers. So again, it's your training swim. So if you're doing that 10K and your friends coming to watch and be the person at the end with your bag, let them see you when you do your 6K training swim, so they understand what it's like when you come out. My crew know that I don't like loads of fuss and give me a minute to get my bearings before trying to put me in my towel and stuff. And it's simple things like that that just make it easier. Have your bag packed so the order you put your clothes on is there. So you don't physically have to think, your crew don't have to think. They literally take one thing out at a time out your bag and put it on you. Simple things like that in an emergency or in where you're really cold makes a huge difference.
Yeah. So there's a question coming in. Well, there's a few questions and we'll just rattle these off towards the end, I think. What is a reasonable swimmer's pace needed to be able to seriously consider a channel swim? I know you said the other day about pacing, and did you mention something it's not something you think about?
No, again, it's quite hard. Like the channel, as long as you keep your arms going around, you will eventually get there. I think the longest channel crossing is like 22, 23 hours. I'm not as fast as I used to be. I hold probably 2 miles an hour for up to 12 hours now. Yeah, that's probably that's not fast. It's probably medium to slow. A bit slower than that. I know somebody that does 40-minute miles and has gone to the channel, but you're going to be in for a long day, and so's your boat and so's your crew. So I think that sort of 30 to 40-minute, if you could get down below that, that would be much better. But if you are a swimmer who's 30, 40-minute mile, then there is a possibility, yes, you can.
Okay. And here's one about the Pentland Firth, of course. How did you plan the tides? How did you plan your swim around the tides there?
So the reason, we got in touch with, so friend Frank Chalmers had tried it, and there was a TV program, Crossing Hell's Mouth, about Frank's. We got in touch through Frank, the guy who was his boatman, and he said he wasn't interested in taking another swimmer, but here's a local fisherman who might help. So Robert Smith is a local creel fisherman. So we got in contact with him. My dad had numerous meetings or phone meetings with Robert Dad's contacted the Coast Guard. Robert contacted local fishermen. So we decided, instead of going for the narrowest route, which is quite dodgy at the finish, we went from Hoy to Scaffskerry, which is 3 miles longer, but gives you more chance of making the finish because you've got the whole width of Scotland across the top of Scotland. The issue with that is in the middle, where the tides meet around the islands, could be a lot worse. So Robert did a lot of homework, went and spoke to fishermen who fish in those areas, and he planned to swim. He asked what speed I swam at, and Dad literally told me to speed up, told me to slow down, told me to speed up, told me to slow down those 4.5 hours across the Pentland Firth, because Robert had it timed. We had to be in set places at set times. Okay. And there wasn't, and at one point we were falling behind, and Dad was like, speed up, and I was like, I can't speed up anymore. But it was it was essential for that swim to happen. So some of the swims, you have to be a certain speed. So the channels may be slightly different, but some of the swims you have to be a certain speed to get to certain places at certain times. And sometimes having that second gear, although my crew will probably argue I don't have it anymore, but I used to have a second speed. So if they needed me to speed up during a swim for tides or for any other reason, then you had that second gear to speed up for a little bit and then drop back down. So Pentland Firth, a lot of work went in from Robert and Dad on learning the tides and then the planning, and then we had to be at certain points at certain times.
It's incredible, really, that you actually went for that swim, it's just phenomenal, really. I would love to have been able to understand the planning around that just with the tides. It just sounds amazing. So here's another question. So for those of us starting out in open water skin swimming, what 5 items of kit would you recommend, especially for cold water swimmers?
Oh, good earplugs.
I agree.
I've got the starter surfer's ear in both ears, so I'd say good earplugs. The ones I've got, you can hear through them, which makes it much easier for communicating with your boat. Swimming cap that fits your head, because I can't get one that stays on my head, and I spend half my swims taking them off and putting them back on. A comfortable swimming costume, and like most swims, you want to swim in an old worn swimming costume, so it's worn to your body's used to it, and it doesn't rub as much. Because the Minch, I had a stupid idea that I'd read something that jellyfish don't like red, so I had a pink costume that I felt was near enough red, so I wore it, but it had seams on the inside, and Mum had to rip my costume off because it was embedded into my side. Oh. It wasn't the right costume to wear, so comfy costume. Yeah. A nice towel that you like, be it like I've got a Robbie robe, so the hooded towel for when I come out. Not the cozy robes, but actually a towel and robe just to get dried and just to be, and even at the start, just putting your hood up so you could just switch off is quite a good bit. I like my Spotify tracker. I've got a spot tracker, which they're cheap to buy but expensive for the contract for the year. I put them in my tow float, so if I'm training on my own, I stick mine in tow float, and there's an SOS button on it if you get into difficulty. But the good thing with them is your friends and family can track you on a swim.
I was going to ask you about that earlier on when you said you sometimes train on your own. There was another question came in about when you train. Just we'll squeeze this in because we've only got 5 minutes left. So do you take when you're on a training swim, do you have all your feeds in a tow float if you're on your own like that?
So one of the swims I did was a 20-minute loop, and I had an inflatable ice cooler. Well, it was a inflatable beer bucket with all my bottles in it, and I anchored it to a stone so that I could come to it, get my feeds, and then carry on. There's a swim where I swim now up the shore. I normally phone Mum or one of my friends to let them know when I'm going in and when I should be out, and I phone them when I get out or message them when I get out. Have my tracker. Don't normally have it on, but it's there if I need the SOS bit of it. But for feeds, yeah, if I have to have a bottle, I'll have one bottle in my bag, but any more than that, it makes your bag too heavy. So I'd rather do shorter loops and top up my bottle than take a few bottles with me.
That's actually sensible, isn't it, really? So people are asking, what is your next big swim? What's your next plans? Are you going to reveal?
I have no clue is the answer to that. I'm looking at 2 or 3 different swims at the moment. One I have to laugh at, because everybody I've spoken to have gone, that's impossible, no way is that doable, which is making me more determined to do it. But I think to get the trust of the local people, I'm going to have to do some shorter swims first to then build up to that one. So yeah, I'm not really giving anything away, but there is a few things. There's 2 or 3 swims that we are looking at, that'll be new challenges that haven't been done before.
Well, that's the thing, you're not going to give it away, are you? Because someone could just come in there and take it away from you.
That's happened before, so yeah, it's a bit of a, yeah. But it is like people coming up with ideas, and sometimes some of them are great ideas. Like Brian, the kayaker, for the Minch, he was like, why? And like my family and Ian Reid call me Col, and Brian calls me Col now. He's like, well, why don't we swim around the Isle of Col? And I was like, in one go, how exciting? He's like, no, 2 or 3 days. And I was like, oh, that's not so exciting. But actually, it was great fun doing it in stages. But like, we had to do it in stages to see if the tides were doable in one go, and it's not doable in one go. But it's about going and giving these things a try, because unless you try it, you don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And in Scotland, we're surrounded by islands as well, you know, so if there's something, a smaller island that one of us want to do, maybe not call, but we can certainly aspire to doing that. That's the whole point of inviting you to this webinar. We've, over the lockdown, we've had a lot of different webinars about different specialisms, and so we had to have a marathon swimmer, and it's just, your achievements are just phenomenal. Have you got anybody that has inspired you, a swimmer that's inspired you?
So I would say 2 swimmers, or there's so many now that you could say. In my early years, I'd say Ian Reid, who's been on my boat, because as I say, I remember as a 12, 13-year-old meeting Ian, and he was the first channel swimmer I've ever met, and I really looked up to Ian, and Ian planned all my swims. So for me at the beginning, even now, like, I was scared of jellyfish. We were in a swim in the River Tay doing a training swim. There was loads of jellyfish. I was like, get me out of here. And Ian's like, you need to pick them up. You need to pick one up so you're not scared. And I was like, well, I'll do it if you do it. So Dad picked up the jellyfish, gave it to me, and I went to give it to Ian, and he just laughed and went, I wouldn't touch that. And I'm like, but Ian, but then there are so many, like Jamie that was on the other week, like the stuff that she does within the ice, but also within marathon swimming. There is so many people that can inspire you to do it. And it is about, some people scream about what they do, and there's other ones of us that just quietly go along and get it done. And I think it's just finding the people that fit you and you can relate to. And yeah, there's so many people, like my sister. Like, I was the annoying little sister and kind of went behind her swims, but she inspired me, and it was probably because of her I got into this. And I think there has been so many swimmers that have helped me along the ways that probably are quite unknown to a lot of people, but to me, actually, they inspired me at that time to keep on going or give something else a try.
Well, I am 100% sure that this talk tonight is inspiring people, because even just chat, you know, from my point of view, as a non-marathon swimmer, I'm looking at marathon swimmers and ice swimmers, and it's something I would love to be able to do, but I think, oh, I'm not there yet. But actually listening and talking to your story, you know, how you start, and it's doable. It is doable, but you've got to have the right mindset, I think. You might agree with me on this, that it's more about the mindset. And obviously you need the ability, but do you think it's mostly mindset? That's one question that I'm thinking maybe we should finish up on. It's now 9 o'clock.
I think mindset has a huge part of it. Yes, you've got to be physically fit. Yes, you've got to be a strong enough swimmer, but your mind has to be in the right place. And I think there was a question in before about not making it and how do you prepare for it, but I don't think you can, because if you go in with the mindset that these things might happen, so might not finish, then the chances are you'll not finish. You go in and that's your job, and you're in there till the end, and that's it. And I know some friends or some people in my early years were kind of joked about because they were their name halfway, because they were renowned for getting it halfway or just past it. And I think it could become then a habit, because the first time you get pulled, it's devastating, it's really hard, but then you could almost get into a habit of it. And I think it's about making sure whatever you're aiming for, your goal, whether a marathon swim to you is 1 mile because you can only swim 200 meters just now, it is how do you build the building blocks up, or as Mum would say, the monkeys off your back. So what things can you do in training to make it on the day that you don't have to worry about it, you know you can actually do it. So yeah, mindset probably is one of the biggest things.
Yeah, Yeah, I think that's, most people will recognise that as well. It's got to be. It's just phenomenal what you've achieved, Colleen, and thank you so much for giving up your time tonight and sharing your story. You've inspired so many people, and you've had so many years of experience as well. There's been a lot of people commenting about how amazing it's been, and just to speak to you on the level almost, you know. So thank you so much. Have you got any last word of advice for anybody out there thinking about doing a channel swim?
It's about being planned. If anybody needs any help, just give me a shout. I'm happy to help. Find me on social media and happy to help any way I can. But it's about being prepared, booking your swim, building up your training, but knocking off as many of those, as Mum would say, monkeys on your back. So do a night swim before you go. So if you have to swim in the dark, then you swim in the dark. My North Channel swim was the second time I'd ever swum in the sea before. Get used to swimming in the sea before you go to the channel. Get used to swimming with a boat, swim in bad conditions as well as flat conditions. There's so many things you can do before you go to swim. So when you turn up at the swim, you know, whatever it throws at you, you've already practiced, and actually all you need to do is swim.
That's just, it's just common sense and great advice as well. That's just amazing. So thank you very much. I think we've gone through most of the questions this evening. There's been quite a few. I think most people are just listening to all your stories and your advice anyway. So thank you so much for this, Colleen. To everybody out there, thank you for attending, and your registration fee is all going to Colleen's charity of choice, which is Scotland's charity. I've forgotten the name of it. That's terrible.
Charity Air Ambulance.
Air Ambulance, of course. I knew it. I just forgot for a minute. So yeah, so that's great. Thank you very much for registering. And it was a great charity to nominate as well, because a lot of people in remote areas or hard to reach areas benefit from the Air Ambulance. So thank you for nominating them. I think we'll probably, Steve, we can stop recording now, and if there's any wee relaxed chit chat.